Picture this. 12,800 years ago, something extraordinary happened on Earth. A flash of light brighter than 1,000 suns streaked across the sky, fragmenting into countless pieces before slamming into our planet with the force of millions of atomic bombs. The impact didn't just change the climate, it may have erased entire civilizations from existence, leaving only traces in our deepest myths and most puzzling archaeological mysteries. What if the rise of agriculture, the birth of writing, the sudden appearance of monuments like Stonehenge and the pyramids weren't humanity's first steps towards civilization, but our desperate attempt to rebuild something far more ancient and sophisticated that had been lost? What if we're not the first advanced civilization to walk this earth, but merely the latest in a cycle of rise and fall that stretches back tens of thousands of years into the mists of prehistory? Welcome to this documentary for Sleep with the Calm Scientist, where tonight we explore the tantalizing possibility that civilizations came before us, and you might just fall asleep fast while discovering the deepest mysteries of human history. I'm here to take you on a journey that will challenge everything you think you know about the past. Now, I have to warn you, this topic might be too fascinating for sleep, but that's part of the charm, isn't it? We're going to weave together cutting-edge science, ancient legends, and archaeological puzzles in a way that's both intellectually stimulating and deeply relaxing. If you enjoy these explorations into the unknown, please like and subscribe so you never miss a video and become part of our community where sleep gets interesting. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, what time it is there, and the weirdest dream you've ever had. I love connecting with fellow explorers of mysteries and always respond. And if you're tired of ads interrupting your sleep, you can now get our first bundle of 15 audiobooks for just $19 down in the video description. That's around 35 hours of uninterrupted knowledge exploration for just $19. Let's begin. Tonight's journey will take us through deep time itself, far beyond the familiar stories of ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, into the shadowy realm where hard science meets ancient legend, where recent archaeological discoveries challenge the very timeline of human development, and where the most respected researchers are beginning to whisper about possibilities that would have been considered pure fantasy just a few decades ago. The question we're exploring isn't just academic curiosity, it touches on something fundamental about who we are, where we came from, and what we might be capable of achieving. Because if advanced civilizations did exist before recorded history, if they built monuments and possessed knowledge that we're only now beginning to rediscover, then perhaps human potential is far greater than we've imagined. Perhaps we carry in our genetic memory, in our myths and dreams, traces of achievements so ancient and profound that they seem like magic. But let's begin at the beginning, or rather, at what we thought was the beginning, and work our way backward through time, peeling away layers of assumption and received wisdom until we reach the bedrock of mystery that lies beneath everything we think we know about human civilization. For most of the 20th century, the story of human development seems straightforward enough. Our ancestors were hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years, living in small nomadic bands following game and seasonal plants, gradually developing language and simple tools, but never staying in one place long enough to build permanent structures or accumulate the kind of knowledge that we associate with civilization. Then, around 10,000 years ago, something revolutionary happened. Humans discovered agriculture. They learned to plant crops and domesticate animals, which allowed them to settle in one place and support larger populations. With stable food supplies and permanent settlements came specialization of labor, the development of crafts and trade, and eventually the emergence of cities, writing systems, and complex societies. This narrative, often called the Neolithic Revolution, has been the foundation of our understanding of human history. Archaeological sites like those in Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, ancient China, and Egypt seem to support this timeline perfectly. The earliest cities, the first writing systems, the most impressive monuments, all appeared within a few thousand years of the agricultural revolution, as if civilization simply sprang into existence once humans had solved the basic problem of food production. But this comfortable story has been crumbling for decades, piece by piece, discovery by discovery, until today it lies in ruins as impressive as any ancient monument. The problem began with sites that didn't fit the timeline, structures that were too old, too sophisticated, too precisely engineered for the supposed capabilities of their builders. Evidence of advanced astronomical knowledge among people who weren't supposed to have had writing, let alone complex mathematics. Signs of global trade networks and cultural exchange thousands of years before such things were thought possible. Consider the site that has become the poster child for these anomalies, Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. When German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt first saw the massive T-shaped limestone pillars emerging from the ground in 1994, he knew immediately that everything archaeologists believed about the development of civilization would have to be reconsidered. The site was 11,700 years old, making it older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years and older than the earliest Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. But age wasn't the only shocking thing about Göbekli Tepe. The precision of the carving, the sophistication of the design, the sheer scale of the undertaking, all suggested a level of social organization and technical skill that wasn't supposed to exist among hunter-gatherer peoples. The pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, had been quarried from limestone bedrock using techniques that we still don't fully understand. They were covered with intricate carvings of animals, abstract symbols, and geometric patterns that speak of a complex symbolic system, possibly even a form of proto-writing. The whole complex was designed with astronomical alignments that demonstrate detailed knowledge of celestial movements. But perhaps most mysteriously of all, Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried. Around 8,000 years ago, the entire site was carefully covered with tons of earth and stones, preserved like a time capsule until modern archaeologists rediscovered it. Who were these people who could create such monuments, and why did they choose to hide their greatest achievement from history? As we dig deeper into the mystery, literally and figuratively, the questions multiply like shadows cast by ancient megaliths. If hunter-gatherers could build Göbekli Tepe, what else might they have been capable of? And why, if such capabilities existed 11,000 years ago, do we see no evidence of continued development? It's as if civilization itself went into reverse, with later cultures building smaller, simpler structures until the great monuments of Egypt and Mesopotamia represent not the dawn of human achievement, but a gradual recovery from some ancient catastrophe. The pattern repeats around the world. In Peru, the precision-fitted stones of sites like Sacsayhuaman and Ollantaytambo dwarf the achievements of the later Inca Empire that claimed them. The mathematical precision required to cut and fit these massive blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, remains beyond our current understanding. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid of Giza displays engineering and astronomical knowledge that seems to have appeared fully formed, with no evidence of the centuries of development and experimentation that such sophisticated construction should require. Even more puzzling are the hints of advanced knowledge embedded in ancient myths and legends. Stories from cultures separated by vast distances and thousands of years tell remarkably similar tales of advanced civilizations destroyed by cosmic catastrophes. The Greek account of Atlantis, the Hindu stories of the Dvapara Yuga, the Hopi traditions of previous worlds destroyed by fire from the sky, the Mesopotamian flood narratives all describe sophisticated societies that were wiped out by sudden disasters, leaving only scattered survivors to rebuild from primitive conditions. For most of the 20th century, these stories were dismissed as mere mythology, colourful tales created by prescientific peoples to explain natural phenomena they didn't understand. But as our own scientific knowledge has advanced, these ancient accounts have begun to sound less like fantasy and more like historical testimony. We now know that Earth has been struck by cosmic objects many times throughout its history. We understand that such impacts can cause rapid climate change, massive tsunamis, and widespread extinction events. We've discovered that our planet's magnetic field occasionally reverses, that massive volcanic eruptions can plunge the world into winter, and that the seemingly stable climate we've enjoyed for the past 10,000 years is actually quite unusual in geological terms. What if the myths aren't myths at all, but cultural memories of actual catastrophes that destroyed advanced civilizations? What if the so-called Neolithic Revolution, wasn't the beginning of human technological development, but a recovery period after a disaster so profound that it erased almost all traces of previous achievements? This is where the story becomes even more intriguing, because we're beginning to find evidence that such a catastrophe may actually have occurred. Around 12,800 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, something dramatic happened to Earth's climate. The planet suddenly plunged back into ice age conditions for more than 1,000 years, an event known to scientists as the Younger Dryas period. The cause of this climatic reversal has been hotly debated, but an increasingly large body of evidence points to an extraordinary explanation. A comet, or more likely a swarm of comet fragments, appears to have struck Earth around 12,800 years ago. The evidence includes microscopic diamonds found in sediment layers of exactly this age, elevated levels of platinum and other elements rare on Earth but common in comets, and tiny glass spherules that could only form under the extreme temperatures of cosmic impact. Perhaps most tellingly, this same sediment layer, found at sites across North America and beyond, contains massive amounts of charcoal, suggesting continent-wide wildfires triggered by the impact. The scale of this catastrophe is almost beyond imagination. Computer models suggest that the impact would have triggered not just fires and tsunamis, but a nuclear winter effect that plunged the planet into freezing conditions for centuries. Ice core data from Greenland shows that the temperature dropped by up to 18 degrees Fahrenheit in just a few years. Massive amounts of Ice Age megafauna went extinct around this time, including woolly mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed cats. Entire ecosystems collapsed. And it wasn't just animals that suffered. Archaeological evidence suggests that human populations in North America crashed around the same time. The sophisticated Clovis culture, known for their expertly crafted stone tools, simply vanishes from the archaeological record. In other parts of the world, there are similar gaps in human occupation right around the Younger Dryas boundary. But here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. Some researchers have begun to wonder if the impact that caused the Younger Dryas period might have destroyed not just Ice Age hunters, but much more sophisticated societies that we've never recognized in the archaeological record. After all, if advanced civilizations did exist 12,000 years ago, they would have been concentrated in coastal areas with favorable climates, areas that are now under hundreds of feet of ocean water due to the melting of Ice Age glaciers. The thought is staggering. Sea levels at the end of the Ice Age were roughly 400 feet lower than they are today. Vast areas of what are now continental shelves were dry land, including regions off the coasts of India, Southeast Asia, the Mediterranean, and the Americas. These would have been some of the most favourable environments on the planet, with mild climates, fertile soils, and easy access to both land and marine resources. If advanced civilizations had developed anywhere, it would have been in these regions, and now they lie beneath hundreds of feet of water, largely unexplored and archaeologically invisible. Marine archaeologists have begun to find tantalizing hints of what might lie beneath the waves. Off the coast of India, sonar surveys have detected what appear to be geometric structures far too regular to be natural formations. Near the Bahamas, aerial photography has revealed straight lines and rectangular patterns on the ocean floor that suggest artificial construction. Off the coast of Cuba, deep-sea explorers have found stone structures arranged in patterns that look remarkably like urban planning. Most intriguingly, off the coast of Japan, divers have explored a vast underwater structure known as the Yonaguni Monument. Discovered in 1986, this massive stone complex features what appear to be carved steps, terraces, and geometric patterns. While some geologists argue that it could be a natural formation shaped by erosion, others point to features that seem clearly artificial, including what looks like a carved face and structures that would require sophisticated engineering to create. The debate over Yonaguni illustrates the broader challenge of investigating ancient civilizations. How do we recognize artificial structures that have been submerged for thousands of years and shaped by marine erosion? How do we distinguish between natural rock formations and architectural remains that have been weathered beyond easy recognition? And if such structures do exist, how do we investigate them properly when they lie in deep water, often in remote locations? But the underwater mysteries go beyond just architecture. In recent years, military personnel and civilian observers have reported increasing numbers of unidentified submerged objects, USOs, that display technological capabilities far beyond anything in known human arsenals. These objects are reportedly capable of travelling at extraordinary speeds underwater, manoeuvring in ways that seem to defy physics, and transitioning seamlessly between underwater and aerial environments. While most scientists remain skeptical of USO reports, some researchers have begun to wonder if these sightings might be connected to the broader mystery of advanced ancient civilizations. Could some survivors of prehistoric catastrophes have developed in isolation, perhaps in underwater environments, maintaining technological capabilities that we're only now beginning to encounter? It sounds like science fiction, but then again, so did the idea of cities older than civilization itself, until we started digging them up. The possibility that we share our planet with unknown intelligences, whether terrestrial survivors of ancient catastrophes or something else entirely, adds another layer to our investigation. Because if advanced civilizations did exist in the deep past, and if some traces of them persist today, then the evidence for their existence might be all around us, hidden not just in archaeological sites but in ongoing phenomena that we don't yet understand. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of our investigation, the possibility that some of the megalithic structures we find around the world were built not by our ancestors using primitive tools, but by beings with technology far more advanced than our current capabilities. The precision cutting and placement of massive stone blocks at sites like Pumapunku in Bolivia, the perfect astronomical alignments of temples and monuments around the world, the apparent ability of ancient peoples to transport stones weighing hundreds of tons across vast distances, all of this suggests engineering capabilities that we struggle to match even today. Conventional archaeology explains these achievements by assuming vast labour forces working over many years with simple tools and ingenious techniques. And certainly human ingenuity and determination can accomplish remarkable things. The building of medieval cathedrals proves that sophisticated construction is possible without modern technology, but some ancient sites display features that seem to go beyond what should be possible with any known technique. Consider the precision fitting of stones at sites like Sacsayhuaman in Peru. The blocks are cut and fitted together so perfectly that a knife blade cannot be inserted between them. This level of precision typically requires modern machine tools and would be virtually impossible to achieve by hand, especially on blocks weighing many tons. Yet there they are, fitted together more precisely than most modern construction, using techniques that we cannot duplicate or even understand. Or consider the astronomical alignments found at ancient sites around the world. These aren't just approximate orientations toward the rising sun, but precise calculations that account for complex celestial mechanics, including the precession of the equinoxes, a cycle that takes 26,000 years to complete. The builders would have needed not just knowledge of this cycle, but the ability to calculate exactly where celestial objects would appear thousands of years in the future. This requires mathematical and astronomical sophistication that wasn't supposed to develop until much later in human history. Some researchers have suggested that these achievements might be evidence of contact with extraterrestrial visitors who shared advanced technology with ancient humans. This ancient astronaut hypothesis has been popularized in books and television shows, but it remains highly controversial among academic researchers. The idea that aliens visited Earth in the distant past and influenced human development is fascinating to consider, but it raises as many questions as it answers. If extraterrestrial visitors had such advanced technology, why did they leave so few traces? Why didn't they establish permanent colonies or leave behind unambiguous artifacts? Perhaps more importantly, the ancient astronaut hypothesis may actually underestimate human capabilities. Archaeological evidence suggests that our ancestors were far more sophisticated than we often assume. Recent discoveries have pushed back the dates for human achievements in navigation, astronomy, mathematics, and engineering by thousands of years. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, who aligned the pyramids with stellar constellations, who calculated the precession of the equinoxes and encoded it in their monuments, may have been human beings with capabilities that we've lost or forgotten. This brings us to another intriguing possibility. What if the knowledge and techniques used to build ancient megalithic sites weren't developed by extraterrestrial visitors, but by previous human civilizations that achieved technological capabilities equal to or exceeding our own? What if the similarities between ancient monuments around the world reflect not independent development or alien intervention, but a shared heritage from a globe-spanning civilization that existed before the catastrophes of 12,000 years ago? The evidence for such a prehistoric global civilization would necessarily be subtle and indirect. Direct artifacts would likely have been destroyed or deeply buried by the passage of millennia, but we might expect to find certain patterns in the archaeological records that reflect shared knowledge and techniques. And indeed, such patterns do exist. Ancient sites around the world display remarkably similar construction techniques, even when they're separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years. The use of precisely fitted megalithic blocks, the incorporation of astronomical alignments, the presence of similar symbolic motifs all suggest some kind of shared tradition or knowledge base. The mathematical relationships found in the dimensions of ancient monuments, from the Great Pyramid in Egypt to temples in Cambodia, follow similar principles and incorporate the same fundamental constants. Perhaps most intriguingly, ancient myths and legends from around the world tell strikingly similar stories about the origins of civilization. These accounts typically describe wise teachers or culture bearers who arrived by sea after surviving a great catastrophe. These figures taught human communities agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, and the arts of civilization before departing with promises to return. The Sumerian Oannes, the Egyptian Thoth, the Mayan Kukulkan, the Polynesian Maui all share remarkably similar characteristics despite originating in completely different cultures. What if these mythological figures weren't gods or aliens but survivors of an advanced human civilization that was largely destroyed by the cosmic catastrophe of 12,800 years ago? What if small groups of survivors, possessing advanced knowledge but lacking the industrial infrastructure to rebuild their civilization, spent centuries traveling the world, sharing their knowledge with the scattered human communities they encountered? This scenario would explain many of the puzzles we've been exploring. It would account for the sudden appearance of sophisticated, astronomical and mathematical knowledge among supposedly primitive peoples. It would explain the similarities between ancient monuments and myths from different parts of the world. It would make sense of the apparent regression in human capabilities after the construction of sites like Göbekli Tepe, as the last keepers of ancient knowledge died out and their teachings were gradually forgotten or transformed into religious doctrine. But if such a prehistoric civilization existed, what was it like? What kind of society could have achieved technological capabilities advanced enough to leave traces that we're still discovering and trying to understand thousands of years later? And most tantalizingly, what happened to them? Did they simply fade away as their knowledge was lost and their population scattered? Or might some remnants of this ancient civilization persist in some form that we haven't recognized? These questions lead us into the deepest realms of speculation, but they're grounded in an increasingly solid foundation of archaeological and geological evidence. We know that sophisticated stoneworking techniques existed much earlier than previously thought. We know that ancient peoples had detailed knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. We know that global trade networks and cultural exchange existed in prehistoric times. We know that massive cosmic catastrophes have struck Earth and caused rapid climate change and mass extinctions. We know that vast areas of potentially habitable land are now underwater, largely unexplored by archaeologists. What we don't know is how all these pieces fit together to form a complete picture of human development over the past 50,000 years or more. But as we gather more evidence and develop new techniques for investigating the deep past, that picture is slowly coming into focus, and what it shows is far more complex and mysterious than the simple progression from hunter-gatherer to farmer to civilization that we learned in school. The implications are profound. If advanced civilizations did exist in the deep past, it means that human potential may be far greater than we realize. it suggests that our current technological civilization, rather than being the pinnacle of human achievement, may be just one point in a much longer cycle of development, catastrophe, and recovery. It raises the possibility that knowledge and techniques we consider cutting-edge discoveries may actually be rediscoveries of ancient wisdom. More practically, understanding the true scope of human history could help us prepare for future challenges. If previous civilizations were destroyed by cosmic catastrophes, climate change, or other existential threats, studying how they rose and fell could provide crucial insights for ensuring the survival of our own civilization. The myths and legends that preserve memories of ancient disasters might contain warnings and guidance that could prove invaluable in the centuries ahead. But perhaps the most important implication is what it tells us about the nature of knowledge itself. If sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering emerged much earlier than we thought, and if this knowledge was subsequently lost and rediscovered multiple times throughout history, it suggests that human consciousness has capabilities that we're only beginning to appreciate. The idea that ancient peoples encoded complex information in myths, monuments, and cultural practices that have survived for thousands of years speaks to forms of information storage and transmission that go far beyond written language. Consider the precision with which ancient monuments encode astronomical data. The Great Pyramid of Giza, for example, incorporates mathematical relationships that weren't supposed to be known until modern times. Its dimensions encode the circumference of the Earth, the distance to the Sun, the length of the solar year, and dozens of other fundamental constants. This information is embedded so subtly and precisely that it took modern researchers using computers and satellite measurements to fully appreciate what the ancient builders had achieved. How did they do it? The conventional explanation is that these relationships are coincidental, that we're reading meaning into structures that were actually built for simpler purposes, but the sheer number of precise mathematical relationships and their appearance in monuments around the world makes coincidence increasingly unlikely. The alternative explanation is that the builders possessed mathematical and astronomical knowledge far more advanced than we've given them credit for, and that they deliberately encoded this knowledge in imperishable stone as a message to future generations. If this interpretation is correct, then ancient monuments aren't just impressive architectural achievements, but libraries of information, textbooks in stone that preserve crucial knowledge across the centuries. The challenge for modern researchers is learning how to read these stone books, to decode the mathematical and astronomical information that may be embedded in every dimension, angle, and alignment. This concept of monuments as encoded information becomes even more intriguing when we consider the possibility that they might contain warnings about cosmic catastrophes. Several researchers have suggested that ancient sites like Göbekli Tepe might actually be elaborate representations of the night sky, as it appeared during the comet impact of 12,800 years ago. If so, these monuments would serve as permanent reminders of the disaster that destroyed previous civilizations, encoded in stone to ensure that future generations would remember and prepare for similar threats. The stone carvings at Göbekli Tepe do indeed show what appear to be astronomical scenes, with various animals arranged in patterns that might represent constellations. Some of the carvings depict headless human figures and swarms of what look like meteors or comets. Could these be artistic representations of the cosmic catastrophe that ended the Ice Age and reshaped human civilization? Are the monuments themselves a form of disaster preparedness, built by survivors to warn their descendants about the cosmic dangers that periodically threaten all life on Earth? If so, then the burial of Göbekli Tepe takes on new significance. Perhaps the site wasn't abandoned because its builders lost interest or died out. Perhaps it was deliberately concealed to protect it from further catastrophes, preserved like a time capsule until humanity was ready to receive its message. The fact that we're rediscovering and beginning to understand these sites now, at a time when we're also developing the technological capability to detect and potentially deflect incoming asteroids and comets, might not be coincidental. This brings us to one of the most thought-provoking aspects of our investigation. Throughout human history, periods of apparent cultural and technological regression have been followed by sudden bursts of innovation and rediscovery. The Renaissance, for example, was largely based on the rediscovery of ancient Greek and Roman knowledge that had been lost during the medieval period. The scientific revolution drew heavily on preserved ancient texts, particularly in astronomy and mathematics. Even today, researchers occasionally discover that ancient techniques for metallurgy, construction, or other technologies were superior to modern methods. What if this pattern of loss and rediscovery extends much further back in time than we realize? What if human development has been cyclical rather than linear, with each period of technological advancement building on the preserved knowledge of previous civilizations, only to be lost again during times of catastrophe and regression? This would mean that our current technological civilization is not unique, but part of a much longer cycle that has been repeating for thousands or tens of thousands of years. The idea of cyclical time is central to many ancient belief systems. Hindu cosmology speaks of vast cycles of creation and destruction, stretching across millions of years. The Aztec calendar described a series of previous worlds, each destroyed by different catastrophes. The ancient Greeks believed in a golden age followed by periods of decline and eventual renewal. These concepts were typically dismissed by modern scholars as primitive attempts to explain natural cycles like the seasons, but they might actually preserve memories of much longer historical cycles involving the rise and fall of human civilizations. If cyclical development is real, it would help explain many of the anomalies we've been discussing. The sudden appearance of sophisticated knowledge and techniques in apparently primitive societies would make sense if these societies were actually inheriting and rediscovering the achievements of previous civilizations. The similarities between ancient monuments and myths from different parts of the world would reflect shared heritage from earlier global cultures. The apparent regression in human capabilities after the peak achievements of sites like Göbekli Tepe would represent the normal pattern of decline following catastrophic disruption. But cyclical development would also have profound implications for our understanding of human potential and our future prospects. If previous civilizations achieved technological capabilities that we're only now rediscovering, it suggests that human consciousness and ingenuity are far more powerful than we typically assume. It means that the limits we perceive on human achievement may be largely self-imposed, based on incomplete understanding of our own history and capabilities. More practically, if civilizational cycles are real, then understanding the patterns of rise and fall becomes crucial for ensuring the long-term survival of human knowledge and culture. Previous civilizations presumably had their own versions of libraries, universities, and scientific institutions, yet their knowledge was largely lost when disaster struck. What can we do differently to ensure that human achievements survive the next catastrophic disruption, whether it comes from cosmic impact, climate change, technological disaster, or some other existential threat? These questions become even more urgent when we consider that we may be living through a particularly vulnerable period in human history. Our current technological civilization is highly complex and interconnected, but also fragile and dependent on systems that could be easily disrupted by natural or human-caused disasters. Unlike previous civilizations that preserve their knowledge in stone monuments and oral traditions, we store most of our information in digital formats that require constant maintenance and could be wiped out by electromagnetic pulses, system failures, or simple technological obsolescence. At the same time, we face potential existential threats that previous civilizations may not have encountered, including nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, and anthropogenic climate change. If human history is indeed cyclical, we might be approaching another period of catastrophic disruption and civilizational reset. Understanding how previous civilizations faced similar challenges and what knowledge they tried to preserve for future generations could provide crucial guidance for navigating the coming transition. But there's another possibility that we haven't fully explored, one that's perhaps even more intriguing than the idea of cyclical civilizations. What if some previous civilizations didn't completely disappear, but instead adapted to catastrophic changes in ways that allowed them to survive, albeit in forms so different from our expectations that we haven't recognized them? What if the traces of advanced ancient knowledge that we find embedded in myths, monuments, and cultural practices don't just represent the legacy of vanished civilizations, but active preservation efforts by groups that have maintained continuity across thousands of years? This idea sounds like fantasy, but it's worth considering seriously. Human cultures have proven remarkably adaptable and persistent. Indigenous societies around the world have preserved detailed knowledge of their environments, sophisticated astronomical observations, and complex cultural practices across thousands of years, often despite tremendous pressures from colonization, climate change, and cultural disruption. If some groups possessed advanced knowledge 12,000 years ago, it's entirely possible that they could have maintained and transmitted this knowledge through subsequent generations, albeit in forms adapted to changed circumstances. Such knowledge preservation wouldn't necessarily require maintaining advanced technology or complex institutions. Indigenous astronomical traditions, for example, often encode precise celestial observations in oral narratives, ceremonial practices, and landscape modifications that can preserve accurate information for thousands of years without any need for writing or instruments. Mathematical and engineering knowledge could be similarly preserved in traditional building techniques, artistic traditions, and cultural practices that appear simple on the surface but embody sophisticated understanding. If this type of knowledge preservation has been occurring, we might expect to find evidence of it in contemporary indigenous cultures, mystery schools, esoteric traditions, and other groups that claim to preserve ancient wisdom. And indeed, researchers have begun to discover that many traditional knowledge systems contain information that is far more sophisticated than previously recognized. Indigenous astronomical traditions often display detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics. Traditional architecture incorporates engineering principles that we're only now beginning to understand. Ancient healing practices utilize biochemical and physiological knowledge that predates modern medicine by thousands of years. The challenge, of course, is distinguishing between genuine preserved ancient knowledge and later additions or coincidental discoveries. But as we develop better techniques for analyzing traditional knowledge systems, and as we learn more about what ancient civilizations might have achieved, we may discover that much more ancient wisdom has survived than we ever imagined, hidden in plain sight within cultures that we've often dismissed as primitive or backward. This possibility adds yet another layer to our investigation, because it suggests that the quest to understand ancient civilizations isn't just an archaeological or historical endeavor, but an ongoing exploration of human consciousness and potential. If advanced knowledge has been preserved in traditional cultures, then learning to recognize and understand this knowledge could unlock capabilities that we thought were lost forever. It would mean that the secrets of ancient civilizations aren't buried only in archaeological sites, but are being actively maintained by communities that have kept the oldest traditions alive. But whether ancient knowledge survives in preserved traditions or only in archaeological remains, the implications for our understanding of human development remain profound. We are clearly dealing with a history that is far more complex, mysterious, and potentially instructive than the simple progression from savagery to civilization that was taught just a few generations ago. The picture that emerges from current research suggests that human consciousness has been capable of remarkable achievements for much longer than we realized, that civilizational development has been far more cyclical and interrupted than linear and progressive, and that we may be living in a time when ancient knowledge is being rediscovered and reintegrated with modern understanding. The evidence continues to accumulate from multiple sources. Archaeological discoveries keep pushing back the dates for human technological achievements. Geological evidence confirms that catastrophic events have repeatedly disrupted civilizational development. Linguistic and mythological research reveals shared themes and knowledge systems across cultures that were supposedly isolated from each other. Astronomical and mathematical analysis of ancient monuments reveals encoded information that demonstrates sophisticated understanding of natural laws. Perhaps most intriguingly, reported encounters with unidentified aerial and submerged objects suggest that technologies beyond our current understanding may still be active in our environment. Whether these represent surviving remnants of ancient civilizations, natural phenomena that we don't yet comprehend, or something else entirely, they remind us that our planet still holds mysteries that could revolutionize our understanding of intelligence, technology, and the development of consciousness. As we continue to investigate these mysteries, several key questions emerge that could guide future research. First, what techniques and technologies might allow us to better explore underwater sites that could contain remains of prehistoric civilizations? The vast majority of the ocean floor remains unmapped and unexplored, particularly in areas that were above sea level during the last ice age. Developing better tools for underwater archaeology could unlock a treasure trove of information about ancient human achievements. Second, how can we better decode the information that appears to be embedded in ancient monuments and cultural practices? If sites like the Great Pyramid and Göbekli Tepe really do contain encoded astronomical and mathematical data, then developing techniques for extracting and interpreting this information could provide insights into the knowledge and capabilities of their builders. This might require new approaches that combine archaeological research with advanced mathematical and astronomical analysis. Third, what can we learn from traditional knowledge systems that might preserve ancient wisdom? Rather than dismissing indigenous traditions as primitive or unscientific, we might benefit from systematic efforts to document and analyze the sophisticated information that these traditions contain. This could reveal survival techniques, natural laws, and ways of understanding the world that have been tested and refined over thousands of years. Fourth, how should we prepare for the possibility of future catastrophic disruptions? If human history really is cyclical, with periods of advancement followed by catastrophic setbacks, then understanding these patterns could help us design more resilient civilizational structures and knowledge preservation systems. This might involve everything from hardened information storage systems to distributed networks of preserved knowledge to early warning systems for cosmic threats. Finally, what are the implications of these investigations for our understanding of human consciousness and potential? If our ancestors achieved remarkable feats of engineering, astronomy, and cultural organization using capabilities that we've forgotten or dismissed, what does that tell us about the untapped potential of human minds? How might we rediscover and develop these capabilities in service of solving contemporary challenges? These questions don't have easy answers, but they point toward areas where continued research could yield profound insights. As we develop better tools for investigating the deep past, and as we learn to recognize and interpret the traces that ancient civilizations may have left behind, we may discover that human history is far richer, more complex, and more instructive than we ever imagined. The story that emerges from this research isn't just about what happened in the past, but about what might be possible in the future. If previous civilizations achieved remarkable things and then lost their knowledge due to catastrophe and cultural disruption, we have the opportunity to learn from both their achievements and their failures. We can work to rediscover lost knowledge while also developing better methods for preserving and transmitting human wisdom across generations and catastrophic disruptions. More fundamentally, investigating ancient civilizations reminds us that human consciousness is capable of far more than we typically assume. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, who encoded astronomical data in the Great Pyramid, who created global networks of trade and cultural exchange thousands of years before such things were supposed to exist, were human beings with the same basic neurological capabilities that we possess today. If they could achieve such remarkable things with primitive tools and without modern scientific institutions, what might we be able to achieve if we fully understood and utilized our own capabilities? This question becomes particularly relevant as we face challenges that may require capabilities beyond our current technological reach. Climate change, resource depletion, overpopulation, and other existential threats may not be solvable through purely technological approaches. They may require the kind of profound understanding of natural systems, long-term thinking, and coordinated global cooperation that previous civilizations may have achieved through different means than our current industrial and scientific methods. Learning from ancient wisdom doesn't mean abandoning modern knowledge or returning to pre-industrial ways of life. Instead, it means recognizing that human consciousness has explored many different approaches to understanding and working with natural systems, and that some of these approaches might offer insights that could complement and enhance our current capabilities. The astronomical knowledge preserved in ancient monuments, the ecological wisdom embedded in indigenous traditions, the mathematical insights encoded in sacred architecture, all represent different ways of engaging with the same fundamental realities that our science explores today. By integrating ancient wisdom with modern knowledge, we might develop more complete and effective approaches to the challenges we face. This integration might lead to new forms of technology that work with natural systems rather than against them, new methods of education that develop human capabilities more fully, new approaches to social organization that are more resilient and sustainable over long time periods. But perhaps the most important insight that comes from investigating ancient civilizations is the recognition that human history is still being written, and that we have the opportunity to consciously participate in shaping how the story unfolds. If civilizational development really is cyclical, we don't have to passively repeat the patterns of the past. We can learn from previous rises and falls, understand the factors that lead to both advancement and collapse, and consciously design our civilization to be more resilient, sustainable, and capable of preserving its achievements across whatever catastrophes the future might bring. This brings us to one of the most fascinating aspects of our investigation, the way that ancient mysteries seem to be revealing themselves to us at precisely the moment when we most need their guidance. The rediscovery of sites like Göbekli Tepe, the decoding of astronomical information in ancient monuments, the growing recognition of sophisticated knowledge in indigenous traditions, all of this is happening at a time when our own civilization faces unprecedented challenges that may require exactly the kind of long-term thinking and holistic understanding that these ancient sources seem to preserve. It's as if the Earth itself is opening up its secrets, revealing layer after layer of hidden history just when we need it most. Archaeological techniques that were developed in the last few decades are suddenly making visible structures and civilizations that had been invisible for thousands of years. Satellite imagery is revealing geometric patterns on the landscape that speak of ancient engineering projects. Deep-sea exploration is beginning to uncover submerged sites that could rewrite our understanding of prehistoric human achievements. At the same time, climate change is exposing archaeological sites that have been hidden under ice for millennia. Retreating glaciers in the Alps have revealed perfectly preserved artifacts from periods we knew almost nothing about. Thawing permafrost in the Arctic is uncovering evidence of human habitation in regions and time periods that were previously thought to be uninhabitable. Changing sea levels are both threatening underwater sites and making others accessible for the first time. Even more intriguingly, the growing recognition of unidentified aerial phenomena by military and government agencies around the world suggests that there may be active intelligences with advanced capabilities operating in our environment. Whether these represent surviving remnants of ancient terrestrial civilizations, visitors from elsewhere in the universe, or something else entirely, they remind us that reality is far more complex and mysterious than our current scientific paradigms acknowledge. The timing of these revelations seems almost intentional, as if some intelligence, whether human or otherwise, is gradually revealing information that humanity needs for its next phase of development. This might sound like mystical thinking, but it's worth considering that if advanced knowledge has been preserved through traditional means for thousands of years, those responsible for its preservation might also be capable of timing its release to coincide with periods when humanity is ready to receive and utilize it responsibly. Consider, for example, the recent surge in interest and research into consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the fundamental nature of reality. These cutting-edge fields of science are beginning to explore questions that have been central to ancient wisdom traditions for thousands of years. The relationship between consciousness and physical reality, the interconnectedness of all phenomena, the possibility of accessing information through non-local means, all of these concepts appear in ancient texts and traditions, but are only now being seriously investigated by mainstream science. If ancient civilizations did possess sophisticated understanding of these phenomena, then their knowledge might be becoming accessible to us at precisely the moment when our scientific methods are advanced enough to test and validate ancient insights. This could lead to remarkable breakthroughs that combine the empirical rigor of modern science with the deep experiential knowledge that traditional cultures have preserved across millennia. The implications extend far beyond academic research. If we can learn to decode and apply ancient knowledge about consciousness, natural systems, and the fundamental structure of reality, we might develop capabilities that seem almost magical from our current perspective. Advanced forms of healing that work with subtle energy systems, technologies that utilize principles we don't currently understand, methods of communication and coordination that transcend the limitations of current systems. Some researchers have suggested that certain ancient sites might actually be technologies in themselves, designed to interact with human consciousness in ways that enhance awareness, facilitate learning, or even provide access to information stored in non-physical forms. The acoustic properties of chambers in the Great Pyramid, the electromagnetic anomalies detected at megalithic sites, the altered states of consciousness reported by visitors to certain ancient temples, all hint at the possibility that our ancestors understood and utilized aspects of physics and consciousness that we're only beginning to rediscover. If this is true, then ancient sites might serve not just as historical artifacts, but as active tools for human development. They might be libraries that store information in the structure of matter itself, universities that teach through direct experience rather than verbal instruction, laboratories for exploring the deeper capabilities of human consciousness. Learning to properly interact with these sites could unlock knowledge and capabilities that have been dormant for thousands of years. But even if such speculations prove incorrect, the basic pattern remains clear. Human consciousness has achieved remarkable things in the past, far beyond what our current models of historical development suggest should have been possible. This means that human potential is greater than we typically assume, and that the challenges facing our current civilization might be more solvable than they appear. The key insight that emerges from investigating ancient civilizations is that consciousness itself may be the most important technology that humans possess. All of our tools, techniques, and social institutions are expressions of consciousness, products of the human capacity for imagination, reasoning, pattern recognition, and creative problem solving. If ancient peoples achieved remarkable things with simple tools, it suggests that they may have developed their consciousness more fully than we typically do in modern technological societies. This doesn't necessarily mean that ancient people were more intelligent than modern humans in terms of raw cognitive ability. Rather, they may have utilized their intelligence differently, in ways that were more integrated with intuitive awareness, more attuned to natural cycles and patterns, more capable of accessing information through non-verbal and non-rational means. They may have developed forms of collective intelligence that allowed groups to achieve things that no individual could accomplish alone, and that modern societies struggle to replicate despite our advanced communication technologies. Understanding how consciousness was developed and utilized in ancient cultures could provide crucial insights for addressing contemporary challenges. Many of our current problems stem from fragmented thinking that treats different aspects of reality as separate and unconnected. We have technological solutions that create environmental problems, economic systems that undermine social cohesion, educational approaches that develop narrow specialization at the expense of holistic understanding. Ancient wisdom traditions typically emphasize the interconnectedness of all phenomena and the importance of maintaining balance between different aspects of life. If we could learn to apply this holistic perspective to contemporary challenges, we might develop solutions that address multiple problems simultaneously rather than creating new problems while solving old ones. For example, approaches to energy production that work with natural cycles rather than against them, forms of agriculture that enhance rather than degrade ecosystem health, economic systems that value long-term sustainability over short-term profit, educational methods that develop the full range of human capabilities rather than just analytical reasoning, technologies that enhance human consciousness rather than replacing human capabilities with mechanical substitutes. The development of such integrated approaches might require rediscovering forms of knowledge and ways of thinking that have been largely forgotten in our rush toward technological specialization. This is where the investigation of ancient civilizations becomes directly relevant to our future. By understanding how our ancestors approached complex challenges, we might learn to address our own challenges more effectively. But this process of learning from the past isn't just about recovering old techniques or ancient wisdom. It's about recognizing that human consciousness itself is evolving, and that each period of history offers unique opportunities for developing new capabilities and understanding. The knowledge that previous civilizations developed was appropriate for their circumstances and challenges. The knowledge we need for our circumstances and challenges may be different, but it can build on the foundations that earlier generations established. This is where the cyclical model of history becomes particularly relevant. If human development really does proceed in cycles, then each cycle doesn't just repeat previous patterns, but potentially develops them to higher levels. Each civilization that rises and falls leaves behind not just ruins and artifacts, but also information and capabilities that can be integrated into subsequent developments. Over long time periods, this could lead to genuine evolutionary progress in human consciousness and capability, even if shorter time periods show apparent regression and loss. From this perspective, our current civilization represents not just a recovery from previous collapses, but potentially a synthesis of all the knowledge and capabilities that humans have ever developed. We have access to information from all previous periods of history, the ability to investigate ancient achievements with unprecedented precision, and technologies that could potentially preserve and transmit human knowledge more effectively than ever before. At the same time, we face challenges that require not just technological solutions, but fundamental shifts in consciousness and understanding. Climate change, environmental degradation, social fragmentation, and existential risks from emerging technologies all require approaches that integrate scientific knowledge with wisdom, technological capability with ecological sensitivity, individual development with collective coordination. The investigation of ancient civilizations suggests that human consciousness has the potential to meet these challenges because it has met similar challenges before under far more difficult circumstances. Our ancestors survived ice ages and cosmic catastrophes, developed sophisticated knowledge without modern instruments, created global networks of cooperation without electronic communication, and preserved crucial information across thousands of years without digital storage systems. If they could do all of this, what might we be capable of if we fully understood and developed our own capabilities? What problems that seem intractable today might become solvable if we learn to think more holistically, to perceive patterns across longer timescales, to coordinate more effectively at global levels, to access information through means that complement our current scientific methods? These questions point toward areas where continued research into ancient civilizations could yield practical benefits for contemporary challenges. As we learn more about how consciousness was developed and utilized in previous cultures, we can experiment with integrating these approaches into modern contexts. As we decode the information that appears to be preserved in ancient monuments and traditions, we can test whether this information provides useful insights for current problems. Most importantly, as we recognize the true scope of human potential demonstrated by archaeological evidence of ancient achievements, we can begin to take on challenges that we might otherwise consider beyond our capabilities. The people who built Göbekli Tepe probably didn't think they were performing an impossible task. They simply saw what needed to be done and figured out how to do it. Perhaps we need to approach our current challenges with similar confidence in human capability and creativity. This brings us to what may be the most important practical application of investigating ancient civilizations. It's not just about understanding the past, but about expanding our sense of what's possible in the future. Every time archaeologists discover that ancient peoples achieved something that was supposedly beyond their capabilities, it reminds us that human potential is greater than we typically assume. If Stone Age peoples could encode sophisticated astronomical data in megalithic monuments, then perhaps contemporary peoples can develop forms of technology that seem impossible from our current perspective. If prehistoric cultures could maintain accurate calendars and predict celestial events without telescopes or computers, then perhaps we can develop forms of knowledge that transcend the limitations of current scientific instruments. If ancient civilizations could coordinate massive construction projects and global trade networks without electronic communication, then perhaps we can achieve forms of cooperation and organization that seem utopian from our current viewpoint. The key is recognizing that every generation of humans faces challenges that seem impossible from their current perspective, but that often turn out to be solvable through approaches that weren't initially obvious. The investigation of ancient civilizations provides numerous examples of problems that were solved through methods that we're only now beginning to understand. This suggests that our current challenges, no matter how formidable they appear, are also likely to be solvable through approaches that we haven't yet discovered or fully developed. But solving these challenges may require more than just technological innovation. It may require the kind of consciousness development that enabled ancient peoples to achieve their remarkable feats. This means learning to think in longer timescales, to perceive connections between apparently separate phenomena, to work with natural systems rather than against them, to coordinate individual efforts into collective achievements that transcend what any individual could accomplish alone. These capabilities aren't magical or mystical, even though they may seem so from our current perspective. They're natural expressions of human consciousness that can be developed through appropriate training and practice. The fact that ancient cultures apparently developed these capabilities suggests that modern cultures can do so as well, potentially to even higher levels by building on the foundations that earlier generations established. As we continue to investigate the mystery of civilizations that came before us, we're not just exploring the past, but discovering possibilities for the future. Every ancient achievement that we uncover and begin to understand expands our sense of what human consciousness can accomplish. Every technique that we decode and learn to apply enhances our capability for addressing contemporary challenges. Every wisdom tradition that we recognize and integrate increases our capacity for navigating the complexities of modern life. The ultimate significance of investigating ancient civilizations may be that it helps us remember who we really are. Not just clever animals who have recently developed technology, but conscious beings with capabilities that span thousands of years of development and potentially extend far beyond what we currently realize. Beings who have survived cosmic catastrophes and ice ages, who have built monuments that encode the fundamental laws of the universe, who have preserved crucial knowledge across millennia of cultural disruption and change. If we can remember this, if we can recognize the true scope of human potential demonstrated by our ancestors, then perhaps we can approach our current challenges with appropriate confidence and creativity. Perhaps we can develop our consciousness to levels that enable us to solve problems that seem impossible today. Perhaps we can create forms of civilization that are more resilient, more sustainable, and more capable of preserving their achievements across whatever changes the future might bring. The investigation of ancient civilizations suggests that this is not only possible, but may be the natural direction of human development. Each cycle of rise and fall potentially builds on previous achievements, leading to higher levels of capability and understanding. Each generation has the opportunity to integrate the wisdom of the past with the innovations of the present, creating new possibilities that transcend both. From this perspective, we are living at a particularly significant moment in human history. We have access to more information about ancient civilizations than any previous generation. We have technologies that could potentially preserve and transmit human knowledge more effectively than ever before. We have challenges that require exactly the kind of integrated, long-term and holistic thinking that ancient wisdom traditions seem to preserve. Most importantly, we have the opportunity to consciously participate in the next phase of human development. Rather than simply reacting to challenges as they arise, we can proactively develop the capabilities needed to address them. Rather than waiting for solutions to emerge accidentally, we can deliberately cultivate the consciousness needed to perceive and implement them. This opportunity comes with tremendous responsibility. If human history really is cyclical, and if we are approaching another major transition, then the choices we make in the coming decades could determine whether human civilization continues to develop to higher levels or experiences another collapse and regression. Understanding the patterns of previous rises and falls could provide crucial guidance for ensuring that this transition leads to genuine progress rather than repetition of past failures. The evidence that we've explored tonight suggests that human consciousness has remarkable potential for development, that this potential has been realized to significant degrees in previous periods of history, and that it could potentially be developed to even higher levels in our current period. The question is whether we will recognize this potential and take the steps necessary to actualize it, or whether we will remain trapped in limited concepts of what humans are capable of achieving. The answer may depend on our willingness to learn from the civilizations that came before us, to integrate ancient wisdom with modern knowledge, and to develop our consciousness to levels that enable us to address the challenges that lie ahead. If we can do this, then our investigation of the past could provide the key to creating a future that surpasses the achievements of any previous civilization. As we reach the end of our journey through the mysteries of ancient civilizations, perhaps the most profound realization is that the investigation is far from over. Every archaeological discovery opens new questions. Every decoded symbol reveals new layers of meaning. Every traditional knowledge system that we learn to understand shows us capabilities that we hadn't recognized before. The civilizations that came before us have left us a vast library of information encoded in stone, preserved in myth, and maintained in tradition. Learning to read this library could transform our understanding of human potential and provide guidance for creating the kind of future that honors both ancient wisdom and contemporary innovation. But reading this library requires more than just intellectual analysis. It requires developing the kinds of consciousness that can perceive patterns across vast timescales, recognize information preserved in nonverbal forms, and integrate analytical reasoning with intuitive awareness. In other words, it requires becoming the kind of beings that our ancestors apparently were at their highest levels of development. This may be the ultimate message that ancient civilizations have left for us. Not just information about what they achieved, but guidance about what we could become. Not just knowledge about the past, but possibilities for the future. Not just evidence of what humans once did, but inspiration for what humans could do again, potentially at even higher levels. The question that remains is whether we will accept this invitation to development, whether we will rise to the challenge of becoming conscious beings capable of addressing the complexities of our modern world with the wisdom and capability that our ancestors demonstrated in addressing the challenges of their time. If we can do this, then the investigation of ancient civilizations will prove to have been much more than an interesting intellectual exercise. It will have been a crucial step in the continuing evolution of human consciousness, a bridge between past achievements and future possibilities, a reminder that we are part of a story that extends far beyond our individual lives, and that our choices can influence the direction of human development for generations to come. The civilizations that came before us achieved remarkable things, and then faced challenges that tested their resilience and sustainability. Some survived and transformed, preserving their essential knowledge in forms that could be transmitted across catastrophic disruptions. Others apparently fell and left only traces for later generations to discover and learn from. We face a similar choice today. We can develop our consciousness and capabilities to levels that enable us to address contemporary challenges wisely and effectively. We can create forms of civilization that are resilient enough to survive whatever changes the future brings. We can preserve and transmit human knowledge in ways that ensure it continues to develop across generations and centuries. Or we can repeat the patterns that led to previous collapses, allowing short-term thinking, fragmented understanding, and destructive technologies to undermine the foundations of civilized life. The investigation of ancient civilizations suggests that humans have the capability to choose wisely, because they have done so before, under even more difficult circumstances. The question is whether we will recognize this capability and choose to develop and use it appropriately. The connection between USOs and ancient civilizations might seem tenuous at first, but consider this possibility. If advanced civilizations did exist in the deep past, and if some survivors adapted to catastrophic changes by retreating to underwater environments, then the mysterious objects being detected in our oceans today might not be visitors from other worlds, but inhabitants of our own world who have remained hidden for thousands of years. The evidence for USO activity is surprisingly robust. Declassified military documents describe sonar contacts with objects moving at speeds that exceed the capabilities of any known underwater vehicle. Navy personnel have reported observing craft that transition seamlessly between underwater and aerial environments, defying our understanding of physics and engineering. Commercial fishing operations have encountered objects on sonar that appear to be artificial structures of enormous size, far too large and geometrically regular to be natural formations. One of the most compelling cases occurred in 1992 off the coast of California, where multiple witnesses reported seeing more than 200 disc-shaped objects emerge from Santa Monica Bay, hover silently for several minutes, and then accelerate away at incredible speeds. 6 years later, Navy Chief Petty Officer Charles Howard described encountering 3 large white lights underwater near Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. These objects, which he estimated to be 10 to 20 feet on each side with a rounded shape, exhibited behavior that suggested intelligent control rather than natural phenomena. The Shag Harbor incident of 1967 remains one of the most thoroughly documented USO encounters. Multiple witnesses observed a large object crash into the waters near this small fishing village in Nova Scotia. What makes this case particularly intriguing is that it was officially investigated by both Canadian and American military agencies, who initially labelled it a UFO report. After dismissing all conventional explanations, Navy divers spent 3 days searching the harbour bottom and reportedly recovered metallic debris, though the official story ends there. However, additional testimony suggests that the object didn't simply crash and sink, but travelled underwater along the coast to a submarine detection facility near Shelburne, where it was joined by a second object. Military witnesses describe a week-long recovery operation involving both Canadian and American ships, with specialised equipment brought in from the United States to assist in whatever they were attempting to retrieve from the ocean floor. These contemporary USO reports gain additional significance when we consider them alongside the archaeological evidence for advanced ancient civilizations. If sophisticated cultures did exist before the great catastrophes of 12,000 years ago, and if rising sea levels subsequently submerged their coastal settlements, then the ocean floors of the world might harbour not just ruins and artefacts, but actual surviving populations that have adapted to underwater existence over thousands of years. This possibility sounds like science fiction, but recent discoveries in marine biology have revealed that life can thrive in underwater environments that were previously thought to be uninhabitable. Deep-sea hydrothermal vents support complex ecosystems based on chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. Underwater caves harbour species that have evolved in complete isolation from surface environments for millions of years. The deep ocean remains largely unexplored, with current estimates suggesting that we have mapped less than 20% of the seafloor in detail. If human populations did retreat to underwater environments following ancient catastrophes, they would have had thousands of years to develop technologies and capabilities adapted to marine existence. Such populations might have retained knowledge from previous civilizations while developing new techniques for underwater construction, energy generation, and transportation. Their occasional interactions with surface dwellers might account for the USO sightings that have been reported throughout history, as well as various legends about underwater kingdoms and sea peoples found in cultures around the world. The ancient Greeks wrote about Atlantis sinking beneath the waves, but they also described various sea deities and underwater realms that might represent cultural memories of actual underwater civilizations. Hindu texts describe Nagas, serpent beings associated with water who possessed advanced knowledge and technology. Celtic legends speak of the otherworld beneath lakes and seas where time moves differently and magical knowledge is preserved. Polynesian traditions describe ancestors who came from beneath the ocean, bringing gifts of navigation and astronomy. These mythological accounts take on new significance when viewed alongside contemporary USO reports and the archaeological evidence for advanced prehistoric civilizations. Rather than dismissing them as primitive fantasies, we might consider the possibility that they preserve memories of actual encounters with surviving underwater populations. But the mystery extends beyond just the possibility of surviving ancient civilizations. Some researchers have begun to investigate whether certain underwater locations might serve as bases or way stations for intelligences that are not originally terrestrial. The famous Malibu anomaly, for example, is a structure on the seafloor off the coast of California that appears remarkably artificial when viewed in satellite imagery. The oval-shaped formation, approximately 2,000 feet below the surface and nearly 3 miles wide, displays features that look suspiciously like columns or pillars arranged around what appears to be an entrance to a darker interior space. While skeptics argue that the Malibu anomaly is simply an unusual geological formation, its regular geometry and massive scale have led others to speculate that it might represent something far more extraordinary. Could this be evidence of an underwater base constructed by surviving members of an ancient civilization? Or might it represent something even more remarkable, a facility created by intelligences whose origins extend beyond our planet entirely? The question of extraterrestrial involvement in ancient human history has been debated for decades. Popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken and Zecharia Sitchin, and more recently by television programs that present ancient astronaut theories to mass audiences. While mainstream archaeology has generally dismissed these ideas as pseudo-scientific speculation, recent developments in the scientific community have begun to change the conversation. The acknowledgement by military and government agencies that unidentified aerial phenomena represent genuine unknowns that display technological capabilities beyond current human achievement has opened the door to more serious consideration of possibilities that were previously relegated to the fringe. If craft with advanced propulsion systems are operating in our atmosphere, and if similar objects are being detected in our oceans, then the question becomes not whether non-human intelligence is present on our planet, but what the nature and origins of this intelligence might be. From the perspective of investigating ancient civilizations, extraterrestrial contact theories offer one possible explanation for the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge and capabilities in prehistoric cultures. The precision of megalithic construction, the sophistication of ancient astronomical observations, the mathematical constants encoded in monument dimensions, all of these could potentially be explained by contact with beings possessing superior technology and knowledge. However, the ancient astronaut hypothesis faces several significant challenges. If extraterrestrial visitors possess technology capable of interstellar travel, why would they leave behind only subtle traces in stone monuments and mythological accounts? Why wouldn't they establish permanent colonies or leave behind unambiguous artifacts that would clearly demonstrate their presence? And why would their influence appear to diminish over time rather than leading to continued technological advancement? One possible answer is that extraterrestrial contact, if it occurred, might have been limited in scope and duration. Perhaps visiting beings followed protocols that minimized direct interference with human development, sharing knowledge in ways that would enhance human capabilities without creating dependency. This approach would be consistent with the pattern we observe in ancient civilizations, where advanced knowledge appears suddenly but is then developed and applied through distinctly human cultural and technological expressions. Another possibility is that what we interpret as extraterrestrial influence might actually represent contact with advanced terrestrial civilizations that developed in isolation from mainstream human populations. If some human groups achieved technological capabilities thousands of years ago and then retreated to remote or hidden locations following global catastrophes, their occasional interactions with surface populations might have been interpreted as contact with gods or sky beings. This scenario would account for the human-like appearance of most ancient astronaut figures in art and mythology, while also explaining their apparent technological superiority. It would also make sense of the way that advanced knowledge seems to be transmitted through distinctly human cultural mechanisms, rather than through obviously alien technologies or institutions. The underground and underwater bases that some researchers believe exist today might represent the modern descendants of such ancient breakaway civilizations. These groups would have had thousands of years to develop technologies that exceed current surface capabilities, while maintaining secrecy about their existence and activities. Their occasional emergence into public view might account for both historical accounts of gods and culture bearers and contemporary reports of USOs and unidentified aerial phenomena. But regardless of whether the sources of ancient advanced knowledge were terrestrial survivors, extraterrestrial visitors, or something else entirely, the implications for understanding human potential remain profound. The evidence clearly demonstrates that sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, engineering, and consciousness development existed in prehistoric times, and that this knowledge was transmitted across cultures and generations through various means. What makes this particularly significant is that much of this ancient knowledge appears to be re-emerging in contemporary scientific research. Concepts that were preserved in esoteric traditions for thousands of years are now being validated and explored through cutting-edge physics, consciousness research, and systems theory. It's as if humanity is rediscovering capabilities and understanding that were once common knowledge but were lost during periods of cultural disruption and regression. Consider, for example, the growing scientific interest in consciousness as a fundamental aspect of reality, rather than just an emergent property of complex neural networks. Ancient traditions have always maintained that consciousness is primary, and that matter emerges from consciousness rather than the reverse. Quantum physics has begun to explore similar ideas, particularly the role of observation in determining the behavior of quantum systems. The ancient understanding of subtle energy systems that flow through the human body and connect individuals to larger cosmic patterns is finding validation in research on bioelectromagnetism, heart rate variability, and the effects of meditation on brain function and genetic expression. Traditional healing practices that were dismissed as superstition are proving to have measurable physiological effects that can be studied and understood through modern scientific methods. Sacred geometry, the mathematical relationships that ancient cultures embedded in their architecture and art, is being recognized as a sophisticated encoding system that preserves information about natural patterns and universal constants. The same proportions that appear in ancient temples and pyramids show up in the structure of galaxies, the patterns of plant growth, and the resonance frequencies of physical systems. Even more intriguingly, some researchers have begun to investigate whether ancient sites might actually function as technologies for enhancing human consciousness or accessing non-local information. The acoustic properties of chambers in various temples and pyramids create specific frequency patterns that can induce altered states of awareness. The electromagnetic fields generated by certain stone circles and megalithic arrangements appear to affect brainwave patterns and subjective experiences of people who spend time at these locations. If ancient civilizations understood and utilized these effects deliberately, then their monuments might serve not just as astronomical observatories or religious centers, but as consciousness development tools designed to enhance human capabilities. Learning to properly use such sites could provide access to forms of awareness and information processing that have been largely forgotten in our technologically oriented culture. This possibility connects to broader questions about the relationship between technology and consciousness that have become increasingly relevant as our own civilization develops more sophisticated tools for information processing and environmental manipulation. Ancient cultures appear to have developed technologies that worked primarily through consciousness rather than through mechanical manipulation of matter. These consciousness-based technologies might have been capable of achievements that seem impossible from our current materialistic perspective. For example, the acoustic levitation techniques described in various ancient texts might represent actual technologies that utilized sound waves and focused intention to manipulate matter in ways that we don't currently understand. The psychic abilities described in traditional cultures such as remote viewing, telepathic communication, and precognitive awareness might represent trainable skills that were once commonly developed but have atrophied in populations that rely primarily on external technologies for information gathering and processing. If such capabilities existed in ancient times, and if they can be redeveloped through appropriate training, then the potential applications for addressing contemporary challenges are enormous. Imagine having access to accurate information about distant locations without requiring physical presence or electronic surveillance. Picture being able to coordinate group activities through direct mental communication rather than depending on vulnerable electronic networks. Consider the implications of developing intuitive awareness that could predict likely outcomes of complex decisions before committing resources to particular courses of action. These capabilities sound fantastical from our current perspective, but they are described consistently across ancient cultures and are reported by contemporary individuals who have undergone intensive consciousness development training. The question is whether such abilities represent genuine human potentials that can be systematically developed, or whether they are illusions created by wishful thinking and cultural conditioning. Recent research in quantum physics and consciousness studies suggests that at least some of these capabilities might be theoretically possible. Quantum entanglement demonstrates that particles can maintain instantaneous connections across arbitrary distances. Quantum coherence shows that biological systems can maintain quantum effects at scales much larger than previously thought possible. Research on the Global Consciousness Project has found statistical correlations between major world events and the outputs of random number generators around the world, suggesting that human consciousness might influence physical systems in ways that we don't yet understand. If human consciousness does have non-local effects, and if these effects can be developed and focused through appropriate training, then many of the capabilities described in ancient traditions might represent real potentials rather than mythological fantasies. The challenge would be learning how to develop these capabilities systematically while integrating them with our current scientific understanding and technological capabilities. This integration of ancient wisdom with modern knowledge might be essential for addressing the complex challenges facing our current civilization. Many of our problems stem from fragmented thinking that treats different aspects of reality as separate and unconnected. We develop technologies without considering their long-term ecological effects. We create economic systems that ignore social and environmental costs. We pursue short-term benefits while overlooking systemic risks and unintended consequences. Ancient wisdom traditions emphasize the interconnectedness of all phenomena and the importance of maintaining balance between different aspects of life. If we could learn to apply this holistic perspective systematically, we might develop approaches that address multiple problems simultaneously, rather than creating new problems while solving old ones. For example, energy production systems that work with natural cycles and enhance rather than degrade environmental conditions. Agricultural methods that increase rather than decrease biodiversity while producing abundant food. Economic structures that value long-term sustainability and social well-being rather than just short-term profit maximization. Educational approaches that develop the full range of human capabilities rather than just analytical reasoning and technical skills. The development of such integrated approaches would require not just new technologies but new forms of consciousness capable of perceiving and working with complex systems as unified wholes rather than collections of separate parts. This is where the investigation of ancient civilizations becomes directly relevant to our future, because it suggests that such integrated consciousness has been developed before and could potentially be developed again. But developing integrated consciousness is not just about recovering ancient techniques or rediscovering lost knowledge. It's about recognizing that consciousness itself is evolving, and that each period of history offers unique opportunities for developing new capabilities and understanding. The knowledge and capabilities that previous civilizations developed were appropriate for their circumstances and challenges. The knowledge and capabilities we need to develop must be appropriate for our circumstances and challenges, while building on the foundations that earlier generations established. This is where the cyclical model of civilizational development becomes particularly relevant and hopeful, rather than merely repetitive. If human consciousness really does develop in cycles, each cycle potentially builds on the achievements of previous cycles, leading over long time periods to genuine evolutionary progress rather than simpler repetition. Each civilization that rises and falls leaves behind not just ruins and artifacts, but also information and capabilities that can be integrated into subsequent developments. From this perspective, our current civilization represents not just another cycle in an endless repetition, but potentially a synthesis phase, where all the knowledge and capabilities that humans have ever developed could be integrated and developed to higher levels. We have access to information from all previous periods of history through archaeological research. We have technologies that could potentially preserve and transmit human knowledge more effectively than ever before. We have global communication systems that could enable unprecedented levels of coordination and cooperation. At the same time, we have challenges that require exactly the kind of holistic, long-term, systemic thinking that ancient wisdom traditions seem to preserve. Climate change, resource depletion, environmental degradation, social fragmentation, and existential risks from emerging technologies all demand approaches that integrate scientific knowledge with wisdom, technological capability with ecological sensitivity, individual development with collective coordination. The investigation of ancient civilizations suggests that human consciousness has the potential to meet these challenges, because similar challenges have been met before under circumstances that were in many ways more difficult than our current situation. Our ancestors survived ice ages and cosmic catastrophes without modern technology. They developed sophisticated knowledge without electronic instruments. They created global networks of cooperation without digital communication systems. They preserved crucial information across thousands of years without electronic storage. If they could accomplish such things with the consciousness technologies available to them, what might we be able to accomplish if we learn to fully develop and utilize our own consciousness capabilities? What problems that seem intractable today might become solvable if we developed our awareness to levels that enable us to perceive patterns and possibilities that are currently invisible to us? These questions point toward practical research directions that could yield significant benefits for addressing contemporary challenges. As we learn more about how consciousness was developed and utilized in ancient cultures, we can experiment with adapting these approaches to modern contexts. As we decode the information that appears to be preserved in ancient monuments and traditions, we can test whether this information provides useful insights for current problems. Most importantly, as we recognize the true scope of human potential demonstrated by archaeological evidence and traditional knowledge systems, we can begin to approach current challenges with appropriate confidence in human creativity and capability. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, who encoded astronomical data in the Great Pyramid, who maintained accurate calendars across thousands of years without written language, probably didn't consider their achievements impossible. They simply saw what needed to be done and developed the capabilities necessary to do it. Perhaps our current challenges, no matter how formidable they appear, are also solvable through capabilities that we haven't yet recognized or fully developed. Perhaps what seems impossible from our current perspective will seem obvious and natural once we learn to think and perceive in ways that are more integrated, more systemic, more attuned to the deeper patterns that govern natural and social systems. The evidence from ancient civilizations suggests that such ways of thinking and perceiving are not only possible but may be natural expressions of human consciousness when it's developed beyond the fragmented, analytical modes that dominate our current educational and cultural systems. Learning to develop these capabilities might not require abandoning scientific rigor or rational analysis, but rather expanding our toolkit to include forms of awareness and information processing that complement and enhance our current methods. The key insight that emerges from investigating ancient civilizations is that consciousness itself is the most powerful technology that humans possess, and that this technology can be developed to levels that enable remarkable achievements. Every tool, technique, and social institution that humans have ever created is ultimately an expression of consciousness, a product of our capacity for imagination, pattern recognition, creative problem-solving, and coordinated action. If ancient peoples achieved remarkable things with simple external tools, it suggests that they may have developed their consciousness more fully than we typically do in our current technological civilization. They may have utilized forms of awareness that are more integrated with intuitive perception, more attuned to natural cycles and cosmic patterns, more capable of accessing information through non-verbal and non-rational means. Understanding how such consciousness capabilities were developed and utilized could provide crucial insights for enhancing our own ability to address complex contemporary challenges. Many of our current problems require exactly the kind of integrated, holistic, systems-oriented thinking that appears to have been characteristic of advanced ancient cultures. But developing such consciousness capabilities is not just about solving practical problems. It's about fulfilling the deeper potential of human existence, about becoming the kind of beings that we're capable of being when our consciousness is fully developed and properly utilized. The investigation of ancient civilizations reminds us that human potential extends far beyond what we typically assume, and that the limitations we perceive may be largely self-imposed based on incomplete understanding of our own capabilities. If we can learn to develop our consciousness to the levels that ancient evidence suggests are possible, we might discover that many things we consider impossible are actually quite achievable. We might find that problems we consider intractable are actually solvable through approaches we haven't yet explored. We might realize that the future we consider utopian is actually within reach through capabilities we already possess but haven't learned to use effectively. This recognition transforms the investigation of ancient civilizations from an academic exercise into a practical exploration of human potential. Every ancient achievement that we study and begin to understand expands our sense of what consciousness can accomplish. Every technique that we decode and learn to apply enhances our capability for addressing contemporary challenges. Every wisdom tradition that we recognize and integrate increases our capacity for navigating the complexities of modern existence. But perhaps, most importantly, investigating ancient civilizations helps us remember something essential about who we are as human beings. We are not just biological machines that have recently developed technology, but conscious entities with capabilities that span thousands of years of development and potentially extend far beyond what we currently realize. We are beings who have survived cosmic catastrophes and climate changes, who have built monuments that preserve universal constants in stone, who have maintained coherent traditions across millennia of cultural disruption and transformation. Recognizing this transforms our relationship to current challenges and future possibilities. Instead of approaching problems from a position of limitation and scarcity, we can approach them from a position of capability and abundance. Instead of assuming that human potential is constrained by current technological capabilities, we can explore ways of developing consciousness that transcend these constraints. Instead of accepting current levels of fragmentation and conflict as inevitable, we can work toward the kind of integrated cooperation that ancient evidence suggests humans are capable of achieving. The civilizations that came before us have left us more than just archaeological puzzles and mythological stories. They have left us evidence of human potential, examples of consciousness developed to levels that enable remarkable achievements, and guidance for developing similar capabilities in our own time and circumstances. Learning to recognize and utilize this legacy could be the key to creating a future that honors both ancient wisdom and contemporary knowledge, that solves current problems while preparing for future challenges, and that fulfills the deeper potential of human consciousness and civilization. The more we delve into these mysteries, the more we encounter a peculiar pattern that runs through human history like an underground river. Knowledge appears, disappears, and reappears in cycles that seem too coordinated to be entirely accidental. Mathematical concepts that were supposedly unknown to ancient peoples turn up encoded in their monuments. Astronomical observations that required sophisticated instruments are preserved in cultures that had no telescopes. Medical techniques that we consider modern discoveries appear in traditional healing systems that are thousands of years old. This pattern suggests something far more intriguing than simple cultural transmission or independent rediscovery. It implies the existence of knowledge preservation systems that operate on timescales much longer than individual civilizations, methods for maintaining and transmitting crucial information across periods of cultural disruption and technological regression. Consider the case of the Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Roman-era shipwreck off the coast of Greece. This bronze device, dating to around 100 BCE, contains gear systems so sophisticated that similar mechanical complexity wasn't seen again in European artifacts until clockwork mechanisms appeared over 1,000 years later. X-ray analysis has revealed that it was designed to predict the positions of the sun, moon, and planets with remarkable accuracy, incorporating calculations for the irregular orbit of the moon and even predicting solar and lunar eclipses. The existence of such a device raises profound questions about the continuity of technological knowledge in the ancient world. If Greek craftsmen could create mechanical computers in the 1st century BCE, what happened to this knowledge during the subsequent centuries? Why do we find no evidence of similar devices in the archaeological record until the medieval period? And most intriguingly, where did the knowledge to build the Antikythera mechanism come from originally? The mathematical and astronomical concepts embedded in the device were not developed overnight. They represent the culmination of centuries or possibly millennia of careful observation and theoretical development. Yet the historical record provides little evidence of the institutions and scholars who would have been necessary to develop such sophisticated understanding. It is as if the knowledge appeared fully formed, was briefly expressed in physical form, and then vanished again into the shadows of history. This pattern repeats throughout the ancient world. The Baghdad battery, a clay jar containing copper cylinders and iron rods that appears designed to generate electrical current, dates to around 250 BCE. While archaeologists debate whether it was actually used for electroplating or served some other purpose, its construction demonstrates knowledge of electrochemical principles that weren't supposed to be understood until the 18th century. Similar anomalies appear in metallurgy. The Damascus steel used in medieval Islamic weapons displayed properties that modern metallurgists struggled to understand and replicate. The steel could be forged into blades of extraordinary sharpness and flexibility, with distinctive patterns that indicated sophisticated control over the crystalline structure of the metal. The techniques for creating this steel were apparently lost by the 18th century, and only recently have materials scientists begun to understand the precise conditions required to produce similar results. Even more mysterious is the Ulfbert sword, a series of medieval European weapons made from crucible steel so pure and of such high quality that it shouldn't have been possible to produce them with the technology available at the time. The swords bear inscriptions that suggest they were part of a coordinated manufacturing process, yet historians can find no records of the workshops or craftsmen who created them. The steel used in these weapons was of a quality that wouldn't be matched in Europe again until the Industrial Revolution. These examples suggest the existence of knowledge traditions that operated independently of the major historical civilizations we know about. Somewhere, somehow, information about advanced metallurgy, precision manufacturing, and complex mechanical design was being preserved and applied, even during periods when mainstream culture had apparently lost access to such capabilities. The preservation of such knowledge would require institutions and practices specifically designed for maintaining technical information across long periods of social disruption. In our modern context, we rely on universities, libraries, and industrial research facilities to preserve and develop technical knowledge. But these institutions are vulnerable to social collapse, war, economic disruption, and technological change. Digital storage systems that seem permanent today could become inaccessible within decades if the infrastructure required to maintain them fails. Ancient knowledge preservation systems appear to have been designed with much longer time horizons in mind. They embedded crucial information in multiple formats, each designed to survive different types of catastrophic events. Stone monuments preserve mathematical and astronomical constants that remain accessible even if literacy is lost. Oral traditions maintain complex information in memorable stories and songs that can be transmitted across generations without writing. Craft traditions preserve technical knowledge and practical skills that can be passed from master to apprentice without formal documentation. Mystery schools and esoteric traditions represent another layer of knowledge preservation, maintaining information in symbolic and metaphorical forms that can survive periods when direct scientific inquiry becomes dangerous or impossible. The alchemical traditions of medieval Europe, for example, preserved knowledge of chemistry and metallurgy in coded language that protected practitioners from persecution while maintaining technical information for future generations. These preservation systems explain how knowledge could appear to be lost from mainstream culture while actually being maintained in specialized communities that operated outside normal historical documentation. The craftsmen who created the Ulfbert swords may have been part of such communities, preserving advanced metallurgical techniques through guild traditions that were deliberately kept secret from outsiders. But the implications extend far beyond just technical knowledge. If sophisticated information preservation systems existed in the past, and if some of them have survived to the present day, then much more ancient wisdom might be available to us than we typically realize. The challenge is learning to recognize these preservation systems and decode the information they contain. This brings us to one of the most intriguing aspects of investigating ancient civilizations: the role of myth and symbolism as carriers of precise technical and scientific information. What we often dismiss as primitive storytelling or religious superstition may actually represent sophisticated encoding systems designed to preserve crucial knowledge in forms that would survive cultural disruption and institutional collapse. The Greek myth of Prometheus bringing fire from the gods to humanity, for example, might preserve memories of the discovery or rediscovery of metallurgical techniques. The story of Icarus flying too close to the sun could encode warnings about the dangers of pursuing certain types of technology without proper understanding of their limitations. The flood narratives found in cultures around the world might preserve detailed information about past catastrophic events, including their causes, effects, and the measures necessary for survival. Even more specifically, some researchers have found that ancient creation myths contain remarkably accurate descriptions of cosmological processes that weren't supposed to be understood until modern astronomy developed. The Babylonian creation epic, the Enuma Elish, describes a primordial conflict between order and chaos that results in the formation of the cosmos through processes that bear striking resemblances to current theories about galaxy formation and stellar nuclear synthesis. Hindu cosmology contains timescales and descriptions of cosmic cycles that align with modern estimates of the age of the universe and the cycles of stellar evolution. The Vedic texts describe processes of creation and dissolution that seem to anticipate current theories about the Big Bang, cosmic inflation, and the ultimate fate of the universe. If these correspondences are more than coincidental, they suggest that ancient cultures had access to information about cosmic processes through means that we don't currently understand or accept as valid. This information was then encoded in mythological and religious narratives that could preserve it across thousands of years while making it as accessible to populations that didn't have formal scientific training. The encoding of scientific information in mythological form would have several advantages over direct technical documentation. Myths are memorable and engaging, making them likely to be transmitted accurately across generations. They can embed multiple layers of meaning, allowing surface narratives to preserve deeper technical information for those trained to decode it. They are culturally robust, likely to be preserved even during periods when scientific inquiry is suppressed or abandoned. Most importantly, mythological encoding allows crucial information to be maintained in forms that don't depend on specialized institutions or elite knowledge classes. Anyone who knows the stories can potentially transmit the information, even if they don't fully understand its technical significance. This creates a distributed preservation system that is much more resilient than centralized libraries or schools. If mythological encoding has been used to preserve scientific and technical knowledge, then learning to decode these narratives could unlock vast stores of information that have been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. The challenge would be developing methods for distinguishing between genuine encoded information and the natural tendency to see patterns and meanings that aren't really there. Recent work in comparative mythology and archaeoastronomy has begun to develop such methods. By analysing the astronomical references in ancient myths and comparing them to actual celestial phenomena, researchers can determine whether stories contain accurate observational data or are simply using cosmic imagery for dramatic effect. By examining the consistency of technical details across different versions of myths, they can assess whether specific information is being deliberately preserved or is just narrative elaboration. The results of such analysis have been startling. Many ancient myths contain astronomical references that are far too accurate to be coincidental, describing celestial events and cycles with precision that matches or exceeds modern observations. Some stories appear to preserve information about geographical features and climate conditions from time periods that predate their supposed composition by thousands of years. Even more intriguingly, some mythological narratives seem to contain warnings about specific types of catastrophic events, along with detailed instructions for survival and recovery. The flood myths found in cultures around the world don't just describe generic disasters, but include specific information about the signs that precede major flooding events, the types of preparation necessary for survival, and the steps required for rebuilding civilization afterward. If such information was deliberately encoded in mythological form by survivors of previous catastrophes, then these stories represent a form of disaster preparedness communication that spans thousands of years. They would be messages from our ancestors, warnings about the types of existential threats that have actually destroyed civilizations in the past, along with guidance for recognizing and surviving similar events in the future. This interpretation gains additional credibility when we consider the geological evidence for major catastrophic events that align with the timeframes described in various flood myths. The Younger Dryas impact event that we discussed earlier occurred approximately 12,800 years ago, which corresponds to the time periods referenced in many ancient accounts of global destruction and renewal. The Black Sea Deluge Hypothesis suggests that a massive flooding event occurred around 7,600 years ago, when rising Mediterranean waters breached the natural dam at the Bosporus and flooded a vast freshwater lake that had supported human settlements. This event would have displaced hundreds of thousands of people and destroyed thriving coastal civilizations, potentially giving rise to the flood narratives found in Mesopotamian, European, and Middle Eastern cultures. Similar catastrophic flooding events have been proposed for other regions and time periods. The filling of the Persian Gulf following Ice Age sea level rise would have submerged extensive coastal plains that supported human populations. The collapse of ice dams in North America created floods of unprecedented scale that reshaped entire landscapes within days or weeks. If human populations witnessed and survived such events, and if they recognized the importance of preserving information about them for future generations, then encoding warnings and survival instructions in memorable mythological narratives would be a logical approach. The stories would serve both as historical records and as practical guidance for dealing with similar catastrophes. But the implications of mythological encoding extend beyond just disaster preparedness. If ancient cultures really did preserve technical and scientific knowledge in story form, then traditional narratives might contain information about everything from medical treatments to engineering techniques to psychological and spiritual development practices. Indigenous healing traditions, for example, often embed sophisticated knowledge about plant biochemistry and human physiology in stories about spirit allies and magical transformations. The shamanic narratives that describe journeys to other worlds might preserve detailed information about altered states of consciousness and their therapeutic applications. The creation stories that describe the formation of landscapes might contain geological knowledge about the processes that actually shaped particular regions. Even fairy tales and folk stories that seem purely fantastical might preserve technical information in symbolic form. The story of Rumpelstiltskin, which involves spinning straw into gold, might encode actual techniques for extracting valuable materials from common substances. The tale of Jack and the Beanstalk could preserve knowledge about plant cultivation, or perhaps even astronomical observations related to the apparent movement of celestial objects. Learning to decode such information would require developing new approaches that combine literary analysis with scientific investigation. Rather than dismissing traditional stories as primitive fiction, researchers would need to examine them for consistent technical details, test any practical claims they contain, and look for correlations with known scientific phenomena. The process would be similar to the way that archaeologists analyze artifact distributions to understand ancient trade networks, or the way that linguists reconstruct lost languages from fragmentary inscriptions. It would require careful attention to detail, systematic comparison across multiple sources, and rigorous testing of any hypotheses that emerge. But if successful, such research could revolutionize our understanding of human knowledge and capabilities. Instead of seeing ourselves as the first generation to develop scientific understanding, we might discover that we are part of a much longer tradition of inquiry and discovery that has been maintained across thousands of years through methods we haven't recognized or appreciated. This recognition would transform our approach to both historical research and contemporary challenges. Historical investigation would become not just a matter of understanding what happened in the past, but of recovering knowledge and capabilities that could be useful in the present. Contemporary problem-solving would benefit from access to the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of human experience with similar challenges. More fundamentally, recognizing the existence of sophisticated knowledge preservation systems would change our understanding of human potential and cultural continuity. Rather than seeing civilization as a recent and fragile development that could easily be lost, we might begin to appreciate the remarkable resilience of human knowledge and the sophisticated methods that our ancestors developed for maintaining crucial information across periods of disruption and change. The investigation of these knowledge preservation systems also raises intriguing questions about the relationship between individual genius and collective wisdom. The great discoveries and innovations that we attribute to individual scientists and inventors might actually represent moments when individuals gained access to information that had been preserved in traditional knowledge systems for generations or centuries. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, produced designs for flying machines, submarines, and other devices that were far ahead of his time. But rather than creating these concepts from pure imagination, he might have been accessing information that had been preserved in esoteric traditions or encoded in classical texts that he studied. His genius might have consisted not in inventing entirely new ideas, but in recognizing and developing concepts that were already present in coded form within the knowledge preservation systems of his era. Similarly, the scientific breakthroughs of figures like Galileo, Newton, and Einstein might represent moments when individuals successfully decoded information that had been preserved in various forms for much longer periods than we typically realize. Their contributions would still be remarkable, but they would be seen as part of a longer continuum of knowledge development rather than as isolated moments of individual inspiration. This perspective would explain why major discoveries often seem to emerge simultaneously in multiple locations, why breakthrough insights often build on earlier work in ways that seem almost inevitable in retrospect, and why scientific progress often follows patterns that suggest underlying organizing principles rather than random exploration. If human knowledge really does operate as a collective enterprise that spans thousands of years, with information being preserved, transmitted, and rediscovered through various means, then our current understanding of intellectual history represents only a small fraction of the actual story. The real history of human knowledge would involve sophisticated preservation and transmission systems that operated largely outside the documented historical record, maintained by communities and traditions that have left few obvious traces. Understanding these systems and learning to access the information they contain could provide invaluable resources for addressing contemporary challenges. Climate change, resource depletion, social fragmentation, and technological risks are not entirely unprecedented problems. Human cultures have faced similar challenges before, in different forms and contexts, and some have found ways to address them successfully. The solutions that worked in the past might not be directly applicable to current circumstances, but they could provide inspiration and guidance for developing approaches that are appropriate for our specific situation. More importantly, understanding how previous generations maintain knowledge and capabilities across periods of disruption could help us design better systems for preserving our own achievements and ensuring continuity across whatever changes the future might bring. But accessing traditional knowledge systems would require developing new forms of scholarship that combine rigorous analytical methods with openness to ways of knowing that extend beyond current academic paradigms. It would mean learning to recognize valid information that has been preserved in forms that don't match our expectations about how knowledge should be documented and transmitted. This process of recognition and integration is already beginning in various fields. Ethnobotanists are systematically documenting traditional plant knowledge and finding that indigenous healing practices often contain sophisticated understanding of biochemical processes. Archaeoastronomers are discovering that ancient astronomical observations are far more accurate and comprehensive than previously thought. Anthropologists are recognizing that traditional ecological knowledge often provides insights that complement and enhance scientific understanding of environmental systems. The challenge is expanding this process of recognition and integration to encompass the full range of knowledge that might be preserved in traditional systems. Rather than approaching ancient and indigenous cultures as interesting but ultimately primitive precursors to modern science, we might begin to see them as sophisticated knowledge traditions that have valuable contributions to make to contemporary understanding. This shift in perspective could lead to remarkable discoveries and innovations. Traditional knowledge systems that have been tested and refined over thousands of years might contain solutions to problems that have resisted purely technological approaches. Ancient understanding of consciousness and human potential might provide keys to developing capabilities that could help us address challenges that seem beyond our current abilities. Most importantly, learning from traditional knowledge systems could help us develop more integrated and sustainable approaches to living on this planet. The fragmented, reductionist thinking that characterizes much of modern culture has produced remarkable technological achievements, but has also created problems that seem increasingly difficult to solve through purely technological means. Ancient wisdom traditions typically emphasize the interconnectedness of all phenomena and the importance of maintaining balance between different aspects of life. If we could learn to apply this holistic perspective systematically, while maintaining the empirical rigor that characterizes the best of modern science, we might develop approaches that address multiple challenges simultaneously, rather than solving some problems while creating others. The investigation of ancient civilizations and their knowledge preservation systems suggests that such integration is not only possible, but may be necessary for the continued development of human civilization. The cyclical patterns that appear throughout history might reflect the consequences of fragmented thinking that loses sight of long-term sustainability in favor of short-term achievements. If we can learn from these patterns and develop more integrated approaches to knowledge and problem-solving, we might be able to break out of cyclical repetition and achieve genuine progress toward forms of civilization that are both highly developed and sustainably maintained across long time periods. The wisdom of the ancients might not just help us understand the past, but could provide essential guidance for creating a future that fulfills human potential while maintaining harmony with the natural systems that support all life. The pieces of this vast puzzle are scattered across disciplines and cultures, hidden in archaeological sites and preserved in traditional knowledge systems, encoded in myths and embedded in the landscape itself. Learning to see the connections and decode the information requires new forms of scholarship that can work across conventional boundaries and integrate different ways of knowing into more complete understanding. But the effort is worthwhile, because the prize might be nothing less than the recovery of human capabilities that have been largely forgotten and the development of approaches to civilization that are both more advanced and more sustainable than anything we have achieved before. The civilizations that came before us might not just be subjects for historical curiosity, but teachers and guides for creating forms of civilization that could flourish for thousands of years while continually developing toward higher levels of knowledge and capability. The landscape itself holds memories that extend far deeper than human record keeping. Satellite imagery has revealed geometric patterns etched into the Earth's surface that speak of massive engineering projects completed thousands of years ago, lines that stretch across continents, earthworks that align with astronomical phenomena, and modifications to natural features that suggest intervention by intelligences working on scales that dwarf our current capabilities. The Nazca lines in Peru are perhaps the most famous example, but they represent only a tiny fraction of the geometric modifications that have been discovered across the planet. In Kazakhstan, archaeologists have identified massive earthworks called the steppe geoglyphs. geometric patterns carved into the landscape that are only visible from high altitude. These formations include squares, crosses, and complex geometric designs that cover areas larger than many modern cities. Similar discoveries have been made in the Amazon rainforest, where laser scanning technology has revealed extensive earthworks hidden beneath the forest canopy. These geometric patterns, created by moving millions of tons of earth, demonstrate that the Amazon was not the pristine wilderness that Europeans encountered, but a landscape that had been extensively modified by sophisticated civilizations. The earthworks include roads, canals, and ceremonial centers arranged in patterns that suggest careful planning and coordination across vast areas. In North America, the Cahokia site near present-day St. Louis shows evidence of urban planning on a scale that rivals medieval European cities. At its peak around 1000 CE, Cahokia supported a population that may have exceeded 100,000 people, making it larger than London at the same time. The site includes massive earthen pyramids, carefully planned residential areas, and sophisticated water management systems. Yet by the time European explorers arrived, the site had been abandoned for centuries, leaving few clues about what happened to its builders. These examples challenge our assumptions about the scale and sophistication of pre-industrial civilizations. The engineering projects represented by these earthworks would have required coordinated labor forces numbering in the tens of thousands, along with sophisticated planning and organizational capabilities. The geometric precision of many of these sites suggests knowledge of surveying and mathematical principles that we typically associate with much later periods of human development. But perhaps most intriguingly, many of these ancient earthworks display alignments with astronomical phenomena that require detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics. The Serpent Mound in Ohio, for example, appears to align with various lunar and solar cycles in ways that would have required centuries of careful observation and calculation to determine. The Göseck Circle in Germany, dating to around 4900 BCE, functions as a sophisticated solar observatory that tracks the winter solstice with remarkable precision. The consistency of astronomical alignments across different continents and time periods suggests either remarkable independent development or some form of knowledge sharing that extended across vast distances and cultural boundaries. The mathematics required to calculate these alignments, particularly those that account for the precession of the equinoxes, represent sophisticated understanding of cosmic cycles that operate on timescales of thousands of years. How did ancient peoples develop such knowledge? The conventional explanation is that careful observation over many generations gradually revealed celestial patterns that were then incorporated into monument design. But this explanation faces significant challenges when we consider the precision of the alignments and the complexity of the calculations involved. To accurately predict the position of stars and planets thousands of years in the future requires not just observational data, but theoretical understanding of the gravitational interactions that govern celestial mechanics. The precession of the equinoxes, for example, results from the gravitational influence of the Sun and Moon on Earth's equatorial bulge, causing our planet's axis of rotation to trace out a slow circle in space over a period of 25,771 years. Understanding this phenomenon well enough to incorporate it into monument alignments would seem to require knowledge of gravitational theory and mathematical techniques that weren't supposed to develop until the work of astronomers like Newton and Kepler in the 16th and 17th centuries. Yet evidence for this understanding appears in monuments that are thousands of years older. One possible explanation is that ancient astronomers developed alternative theoretical frameworks that allowed them to achieve similar results through different means. Rather than understanding gravity as a fundamental force, they might have developed mathematical methods for predicting celestial movements based on pattern recognition and cyclical analysis. These methods could have been just as accurate as modern techniques, while being based on entirely different conceptual foundations. Another possibility is that ancient astronomers had access to observational data spanning much longer time periods than we typically assume. If astronomical observations were systematically maintained and transmitted across thousands of years, then patterns that seem impossible to detect within individual lifetimes could become apparent through accumulated data. This would require institutional continuity and record-keeping capabilities that extend far beyond what conventional archaeology has documented, but the precision of ancient alignment suggests that such capabilities may have existed. Perhaps most intriguingly, some researchers have suggested that ancient astronomical knowledge might have been acquired through non-conventional means, including altered states of consciousness that provided direct access to information about cosmic patterns. Traditional shamanic practices around the world include techniques for achieving visionary states that reportedly provide knowledge about natural processes and future events. If such techniques can actually access accurate information, they might explain how ancient peoples acquired understanding that seems beyond the reach of normal observational methods. While this explanation may seem far-fetched from a modern scientific perspective, it's worth noting that many indigenous cultures maintain detailed knowledge about their environments that appears to exceed what could be acquired through normal observation and experience. Traditional healers often display remarkable understanding of plant biochemistry and human physiology. Indigenous weather predictors can forecast climate patterns with accuracy that rivals modern meteorological techniques. Traditional navigators can traverse vast ocean distances without instruments, using subtle environmental cues that trained scientists struggle to perceive. If human consciousness can access accurate information about environmental and physiological processes through non-rational means, it's conceivable that similar techniques could provide insights into astronomical patterns and cosmic cycles. The challenge would be distinguishing between genuine information and the subjective experiences that can arise during altered states of consciousness. Recent research in consciousness studies has begun to investigate whether human awareness can actually access non-local information through means that extend beyond the normal sensory channels. The Global Consciousness Project has found statistical correlations between major world events and the outputs of random number generators located around the globe, suggesting that human consciousness might influence physical systems in ways that we don't yet understand. Studies of remote viewing have documented cases where individuals appear to acquire accurate information about distant locations through means that don't involve normal sensory channels. If such capabilities exist and can be developed through appropriate training, they might explain how ancient peoples acquired knowledge that seems impossible to obtain through conventional observation and analysis. The astronomical information encoded in ancient monuments might represent the results of consciousness-based investigation techniques that were once commonly practiced but have been largely forgotten in our technologically oriented culture. But regardless of how ancient peoples acquired their astronomical knowledge, the precision and sophistication of their achievements raises profound questions about the continuity of human civilization and the potential for capabilities that we haven't recognized or developed. The builders of ancient observatories clearly possessed mathematical and engineering skills that enabled them to create structures of remarkable precision and durability. They coordinated massive construction projects that required organizational capabilities comparable to modern industrial enterprises. They maintained cultural traditions that preserved complex technical information across many generations. If such capabilities existed in the past, what happened to them? Why do we see apparent regression in human achievements during certain periods of history? And most importantly, could similar capabilities be redeveloped in our current era, potentially enabling us to address challenges that seem beyond our current technological and organizational abilities? The pattern of rise and decline that appears throughout human history suggests that the development of civilization is not a simple linear progression from primitive to advanced, but a complex process that involves cycles of expansion and contraction, integration and fragmentation, achievement and loss. Understanding these cycles could provide crucial insights for ensuring that our current civilization develops in directions that are sustainable over long time periods. One of the most striking features of ancient civilizations is their apparent ability to maintain cultural coherence across vast geographical areas and extended time periods. The ancient Egyptian civilization maintained recognizable cultural patterns for over 3,000 years, during which time it survived multiple political upheavals, foreign invasions, and environmental changes. The Chinese civilization has maintained cultural continuity for over 4,000 years, adapting to countless changes while preserving essential elements of its worldview and social organization. In contrast, modern technological civilization has existed for only a few centuries, and already shows signs of fragmentation and instability that raise questions about its long-term sustainability. Our rapid technological development has created unprecedented capabilities, but also unprecedented vulnerabilities. Our global communication systems enable remarkable coordination, but also create systemic risks that could cause worldwide disruption within hours or days. Ancient civilizations appear to have been designed for resilience and longevity, rather than rapid change and maximum efficiency. They developed slowly, maintained stability for extended periods, and incorporated mechanisms for preserving essential knowledge and capabilities across periods of disruption. While they may have lacked some of the technical capabilities that we possess today, they demonstrated forms of wisdom about sustainable social organization that we might learn from. The key insight that emerges from studying ancient civilizations is that sustainability requires balance between different aspects of cultural development. Pure technological advancement without corresponding development of wisdom and social coherence leads to capabilities that exceed our ability to use them responsibly. Rapid change without institutional mechanisms for preserving essential knowledge and values leads to fragmentation and loss of cultural continuity. Ancient wisdom traditions emphasize the importance of maintaining harmony between technological capability, social organization, and spiritual development. They suggest that sustainable civilization requires not just the ability to manipulate the physical environment, but also the wisdom to understand the long-term consequences of our actions and the social coherence necessary to coordinate collective responses to complex challenges. This perspective offers important guidance for addressing the challenges facing our current civilization. Rather than pursuing technological advancement as an end in itself, we might focus on developing technologies that enhance rather than replace human capabilities. Rather than maximizing efficiency in the short term, we might design systems that maintain resilience and adaptability over long time periods. Rather than treating different aspects of human development as separate domains, we might work toward integrated approaches that address technological, social, and consciousness-related challenges simultaneously. The investigation of ancient civilizations suggests that such integrated approaches are not only possible but may be necessary for long-term sustainability. The archaeological evidence demonstrates that human consciousness is capable of remarkable achievements when properly developed and appropriately applied. The traditional knowledge systems that have survived from ancient times preserve sophisticated understanding of natural processes and human potential that could inform contemporary approaches to sustainable development. But accessing and applying this wisdom requires forms of scholarship and investigation that extend beyond conventional academic boundaries. It means learning to recognize valuable information that has been preserved in forms that don't match our current expectations about how knowledge should be documented and transmitted. It means developing research methods that can integrate analytical rigor with openness to ways of knowing that have been marginalized by purely materialistic approaches to understanding. The process is already beginning in various fields. Biomimetics researchers study natural systems to develop technologies that work with rather than against natural processes. Ethnobotanists document traditional plant knowledge and find that indigenous healing practices often contain sophisticated understanding of biochemical processes. Consciousness researchers investigate traditional meditation techniques and discover that they can produce measurable changes in brain function and genetic expression. But the full integration of ancient wisdom with contemporary knowledge would require much more systematic and comprehensive efforts. It would mean treating traditional knowledge systems as sophisticated, scientific traditions rather than primitive folklore. It would mean investigating consciousness development techniques with the same rigor that we apply to technological research. It would mean designing social and economic systems based on understanding of human nature and environmental processes rather than purely abstract theoretical models. Most importantly, it would mean recognizing that human potential extends far beyond what we typically assume, and that the challenges facing our civilization might be solvable through capabilities that we haven't fully recognized or developed. The people who built Göbekli Tepe, who encoded astronomical data in the Great Pyramid, who maintained accurate calendars for thousands of years without writing systems, were human beings with the same basic neurological and intellectual capabilities that we possess today. If they could achieve such remarkable things, what might we be capable of if we learned to develop our consciousness and apply our capabilities as effectively as they apparently did? What problems that seem impossible today might become solvable if we expanded our toolkit to include the full range of human potential rather than limiting ourselves to purely technological approaches? These questions point toward research directions that could yield profound benefits for addressing contemporary challenges. As we learn more about how consciousness was developed in ancient cultures, we can experiment with adapting these approaches to modern contexts. As we decode the information preserved in traditional knowledge systems, we can test whether this information provides useful insights for current problems. As we recognize the true scope of human capabilities demonstrated by archaeological evidence, we can begin to approach seemingly impossible challenges with appropriate confidence in human creativity and potential. The key insight that emerges from investigating ancient civilizations is that consciousness itself is the most fundamental technology that humans possess, and that this technology can be developed to levels that enable remarkable achievements. Every tool, technique, and social institution that humans have ever created is ultimately an expression of consciousness, a product of our capacity for awareness, imagination, pattern recognition, and creative problem-solving. If ancient peoples developed their consciousness more fully than we typically do in modern technological societies, then learning from their approaches could enhance our ability to address the complex challenges that face our current civilization. Rather than seeing technology and consciousness as separate domains, we might learn to integrate them in ways that produce solutions that neither purely technological nor purely consciousness-based approaches could achieve alone. This integration might lead to new forms of technology that work with natural systems, rather than against them, new methods of social organization that enhance rather than suppress human potential, new approaches to education that develop the full range of human capabilities rather than just analytical reasoning, and new forms of economic activity that value long-term sustainability and social well-being rather than just short-term profit maximization. The civilizations that came before us achieved remarkable things through approaches that we're only beginning to understand and appreciate. Their legacy suggests that human potential is far greater than we typically assume, and that the challenges facing our current civilization, no matter how formidable they appear, are likely to be solvable through capabilities that we haven't fully recognized or developed. But accessing these capabilities requires more than just studying ancient achievements or decoding traditional knowledge systems. It requires recognizing that consciousness development is not just an interesting subject for academic investigation, but a practical necessity for addressing the challenges that threaten the long-term sustainability of human civilization. The evidence from ancient civilizations suggests that such development is possible, and that it could lead to forms of achievement that transcend anything we have accomplished through purely technological means. The question is whether we will recognize this potential and take the steps necessary to develop it, or whether we will continue to limit ourselves to approaches that, while impressive in their own right, may not be adequate for addressing the full complexity of the challenges we face. The investigation of ancient civilizations is ultimately an investigation into human potential itself. Every achievement that we discover and begin to understand expands our sense of what consciousness can accomplish. Every technique that we decode and learn to apply enhances our capability for addressing contemporary challenges. Every wisdom tradition that we recognize and integrate increases our capacity for navigating the complexities of existence on this planet. The civilizations that came before us have left us more than just archaeological puzzles and historical curiosities. They have left us evidence of capabilities that we didn't know we possessed, examples of achievements that seemed impossible from our previous understanding of human potential, and guidance for developing forms of consciousness that could enable us to create sustainable and fulfilling ways of life. Learning to recognize and apply this legacy could transform not just our understanding of history, but our approach to the future. Instead of seeing ourselves as isolated individuals struggling against an indifferent universe, we might begin to appreciate our participation in a vast collective enterprise that spans thousands of years and potentially extends far beyond our individual lifetimes. Rather than limiting ourselves to the capabilities that seem obvious from our current perspective, we might discover potentials that have been dormant for generations, waiting for the right conditions and understanding to be reactivated and developed to new levels. The consciousness that built ancient monuments and preserved wisdom across millennia still exists within us, and learning to access and develop it could be the key to creating forms of civilization that fulfill human potential while maintaining harmony with the natural systems that support all life. The patterns that emerge from investigating ancient civilizations suggest that we are living at a particularly significant moment in human history. We have access to more information about our past than any previous generation, technologies that could preserve and transmit human knowledge more effectively than ever before, and challenges that require exactly the kind of integrated, long-term, holistic thinking that ancient wisdom traditions seem to preserve. Most importantly, we have the opportunity to consciously participate in the next phase of human development, rather than simply reacting to events as they unfold. By learning from the achievements and failures of previous civilizations, by integrating ancient wisdom with contemporary knowledge, and by developing our consciousness to levels that enable us to perceive and work with the deeper patterns that govern natural and social systems, we might be able to create forms of civilization that transcend the limitations and problems that have characterized human societies throughout history. As we reach the gentle conclusion of our journey through time tonight, perhaps the most profound realization is that we are not alone, not in the cosmic sense that science fiction often explores, but in the deeper sense that we are part of an unbroken chain of consciousness and achievement that extends back through thousands of years of human experience. The civilizations that came before us faced challenges remarkably similar to our own. They grappled with questions of sustainability and growth, harmony and progress, individual development and collective wisdom. Some found ways to create cultures that flourished for millennia while maintaining balance with natural systems. Others achieved remarkable heights before falling to the same kinds of fragmentation and short-sightedness that threaten our own civilization today. But what emerges most clearly from our investigation is not a story of inevitable cycles of rise and fall, but evidence of human potential that extends far beyond what we typically imagine possible. In the precision of ancient monuments, in the sophistication of traditional knowledge systems, in the resilience of wisdom preserved across catastrophic disruptions, we find proof that consciousness itself is the most powerful technology humans have ever developed. The builders of Göbekli Tepe working with stone tools achieved engineering precision that challenges our modern capabilities. The astronomers who encoded celestial mechanics in pyramid dimensions possessed mathematical understanding that anticipates discoveries we credit to much later periods. The cultures that maintained accurate calendars for thousands of years without writing demonstrated information processing capabilities that suggest forms of collective intelligence we haven't learned to replicate. These achievements remind us that human potential is not limited by the technologies we currently possess or the social structures we currently maintain. The same consciousness that created ancient wonders exists within us today, dormant perhaps, but waiting for the right conditions and understanding to reawaken and express itself in forms appropriate to our contemporary challenges. The evidence suggests that we may be living at a unique moment in history when this reawakening becomes not just possible but necessary. Our global communication systems give us access to wisdom traditions from around the world. Our archaeological techniques are revealing achievements that were previously invisible or misunderstood. Our consciousness research is beginning to validate capabilities that traditional cultures took for granted. Most importantly, we face challenges that seem to require exactly the kind of integrated, holistic, long-term thinking that ancient civilizations apparently developed. Climate change, resource depletion, social fragmentation, and technological risks all demand approaches that can perceive complex interconnections and work with natural systems rather than against them. The path forward suggested by our investigation is neither a return to ancient ways nor a continuation of purely technological development, but a synthesis that combines the best of both. We might develop technologies that enhance rather than replace human consciousness, social systems that foster rather than suppress human potential, and economic approaches that value sustainability and wisdom alongside innovation and efficiency. Such a synthesis would represent not just recovery from ancient knowledge, but genuine evolution beyond what any previous civilization has achieved. By learning from the achievements and mistakes of those who came before us, we could potentially create forms of civilization that transcend the limitations that led to previous collapses while maintaining the remarkable capabilities that ancient cultures demonstrated. The investigation of ancient civilizations ultimately teaches us that human beings are capable of far more than we usually assume. We carry within us the same consciousness that built monuments encoding universal constants, that preserved crucial knowledge across millennia of disruption, that developed forms of sustainable culture lasting thousands of years. Recognizing this potential transforms our relationship to current challenges and future possibilities. Instead of approaching problems from a position of limitation, we can draw upon capabilities that have been tested and proven across thousands of years of human experience. Instead of seeing ourselves as isolated individuals in a chaotic world, we can appreciate our participation in a vast collective intelligence that spans cultures and centuries. The civilizations that came before us have given us more than historical curiosities and archaeological puzzles. They have given us evidence of what we are capable of becoming when human consciousness is fully developed and properly applied. Their legacy lives on not just in stone monuments and preserved traditions, but in the potential that exists within each of us to participate consciously in the continuing evolution of human civilization. As you rest tonight, perhaps you can carry with you a sense of connection to this ancient wisdom and future possibility. The dreams that come may carry echoes of achievements both past and yet to be realized, reminders that consciousness itself is the bridge between what has been and what could be. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the mysteries of human potential. If you found value in exploring these possibilities, I encourage you to like and subscribe so we can continue investigating the fascinating borderlands, where science meets wonder and sleep becomes a doorway to deeper understanding. Your engagement helps build a community of curious minds who recognize that the most important discoveries often emerge from the spaces between conventional categories of thought. Remember, the greatest mystery isn't whether advanced civilizations came before us, but whether we will recognize and develop the remarkable capabilities that our investigation suggests we all possess. The answer to that question will determine not just our understanding of the past, but the kind of future we create for generations yet to come. Rest well, fellow explorers of consciousness. May your sleep be filled with visions of ancient wisdom and future potential, and may you awaken refreshed and inspired to participate consciously in the next chapter of humanity's extraordinary journey through time and space.